Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 1st of June, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So the OP token finally dropped over the last 24 hours. Obviously, you've all heard of this by now, so not much to go through there. I'm sure a lot of you have claimed your airdrops at this stage. You know, maybe you're delegating them to one of the kind of like governance delegates. Maybe you sold some or all of it. Maybe you traded it back to ETH. I don't know. It's totally up to you what you do with your airdrop. That's for sure. I did have a few people kind of like asking me what to do with the airdrop and kind of like what my opinion was on the OP token value. Guys, I'm never going to comment directly on a token except ETH. Like ETH is the only token or coin that I make an exception for because I have ETH bags obviously, but I don't plan to sell my ETH. So I don't feel bad for kind of like, I guess you could say shilling ETH, you know, because I'm not going to be dumping on anyone, so to speak, and I'm not kind of like just talking my book, so to speak. I mean, I am in a way, but it's kind of different, right? Plus, it's kind of hard for me not to comment on ETH since this whole channel revolves around Ethereum and ETH, right? So in saying that, I'm not going to comment on the token value. Also because I got a rather large airdrop and I also am an investor in Optimism as part of their Series B. So just wouldn't be responsible for me to do that. So I'm not going to do that. But, you know, I commend you for trying to get me to commit to something. I'm not. And look, I don't think anyone knows where the price is going to go. There's been a bunch of really great discussions in the Discord channel. So if you do want to get people's opinions on what the price is going to do, whether you should hold it or not, definitely you can have those conversations in the channel. I'm never going to stop you guys from doing that, but I'm personally not going to kind of like answer, you know, much questions around that. And you guys know my general view on tokens, right, where I basically say that there's a bunch of criteria that you need to look at when judging tokens, and you know that applies to every token. So I still got to do that standalone video I spoke about where I go through my, you know, criteria of kind of like how I judge tokens and how I decide what's good to buy, what's not good to buy, and stuff like that. Like, but maybe not kind of like talking about specific tokens, but just talking from like a high level. But anyway, enough about the token price and speculative side of things. Now that the OP token is live, I guess we can officially say that L2 summer has started. I mean, today's the first day of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, I believe. Depending where you are, like it's kind of weird. Different countries or different places in the world have like different official start dates, so to speak. I've always just kind of like said, okay, well, June, July, August is like winter from where I am. It's very cold here actually right now in Melbourne. It's freezing last night, and it's funny that the top part of the world is is in summer. But yeah, northern kind of like hemisphere is starting its summer here on the 1st of June. Technically, the OP token launched on May 31st, I guess, in kind of like the US and Europe, but for me it was the 1st of June. So yeah, L2 summer has kicked off. I'm sure we're going to see more tokens come out relatively soon. You know, it's funny. I used to say on the refuel that I thought Optimism would be one of the last teams to issue their token, and they kind of like, I mean, honestly, I think that they were positioned for that, but then they just did a 180 all of a sudden, and we're like, no, we're going to be the first ones to do it, right? We're going to be one of the first L2s or first out of the kind of like major ones to do it. Obviously, Polygon already has a token with Matic, right? So that there's no token coming from there. It's already live. Arbitrum doesn't have one, zkSync doesn't have one, Starco doesn't have one, Scroll doesn't have one. You know, I mean, and there are some others like Immutable and Loopring, but if you're talking about the major kind of like generalized platforms, none of them have it except Optimism and kind of like Polygon, right? So we'll have to see how that kind of like shakes out over the coming months, see which teams goes next, you know, and kind of like how Optimism uses the OP token to incentivize growth as well. I think if anything's going to push the other layer 2 platforms to do tokens faster than they otherwise would have, it's seeing Optimism have a lot of success with their token through incentives and things like that, right? So we're going to have to see how that shakes out. But if you want to keep track of the actual kind of like airdrop, so this is only the first airdrop that Optimism has kind of like done as part of the OP token distribution. There will be ones going in the future. But if you want to keep track of OP airdrop 1, Hildobby has put together a great Dune analytics dashboard that you can kind of view here. I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. So far, 112 million OP has been claimed, which is just over 50%. So 54% of the airdrop has been claimed. 95,000 addresses have claimed with kind of like 40% of the eligible ones doing it. So you can see here kind of like what the claims look like here. You know, it's funny. I wonder like how many people haven't claimed yet because they're waiting for kind of like the price to drop for tax reasons. That's actually something to consider for people who live in countries where an airdrop is considered income at time of claim or receipt, because right now I haven't claimed my airdrop yet, so my airdrop's sitting in the contract still. That's technically not mine yet, right? The tokens belong to the contract. Yes, I can claim them, but I don't have them yet, so I haven't incurred any kind of like taxable events. But if I was to claim it and it was to go to my wallet, then immediately at the price that I claim it at, say the OP token price is $1.50, I would have to calculate how much tax I owe on the entire amount, right? How much income tax I owe on the entire amount, and then cash out OP to pay for that or cover it with some other way. So the funny thing is, for me personally, I'm actually waiting till July 1st to claim. So July 1st is when the financial year resets for Australia. Our financial year is July 1st to June 30th, and that'll kind of like reset my income, and then I'll just claim then and kind of I guess like pay whatever tax is owed from there, rather than claiming now. And if I claim now, I have to pay basically half of it as tax, 47% as tax, right? Which I don't want to do, because I personally want to hold the OP tokens. I want to delegate them to kind of like governance, but I would have to probably sell a decent chunk of them to cover the tax bill. So I think there's a lot of people in my position. Maybe they're not going to wait till July 1st, but maybe they're going to wait till the price drops more before kind of like before claiming, in order to kind of like minimize their tax obligations. I'm not sure. It depends where you are. It depends how airdrops are kind of treated depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. But yeah, that might be a reason why there's still a lot of airdrop that hasn't been claimed yet. But we typically see this. I mean, with the ENS airdrop, I believe there was a bunch of tokens. I can't remember exactly how much, like what percentage it was, maybe 5 or 10% or something like that. Someone can correct me in the comments maybe, but essentially, that was kind of like not claimed, and then it was just sent back to the treasury. So a similar thing might happen to Optimism here. I doubt you're going to get to 100% claimed. Like it just doesn't really happen like that, right? Because I'm sure there's people who have left the ecosystem because the bull market subsided, who maybe used Optimism or did one of the things that entitled them to an airdrop, and they just aren't around to know that they have an airdrop, right? Like how sad is that? Like imagine you have an airdrop of, even if you only got like one of the smaller airdrops from OP, like 500 or 1,000 OP tokens, right? That's still worth like a decent sum of money to kind of like most people out there. And how sad is that you miss out on that if you kind of like left because you got bored of crypto because you're only here for the bull market. And this is what I mean by playing those long-term games, guys, and not leaving during kind of like bear markets, is because there's still opportunity. There's still plenty of opportunity out there. I mean, even things like NFTs, like I don't think I spoke about this on the refuel, but there was this Goblin thing the other day, this Goblin NFT, and everyone thought it was really dumb, and it was really dumb, right? But that pumped for some reason. It's up to like, I think it was like a free mint or like a very cheap mint. Now it's at like 6 ETH per Goblin NFT. And this is not me kind of like endorsing that NFT or telling you to go buy it or anything like that. But it's just me using an example of, just because it's a bear market doesn't mean there's not opportunity. And there's actually, I would argue, more opportunity in a bear market than a bull market in terms of like positioning yourself for long-term success. And I've spoken about this plenty of times before, but I want to keep on topic with the OP stuff here. So definitely check out this dashboard. And I put out a tweet today where I said, friendly reminder, the OP airdrop is going to generate a lot of fee revenue on the Optimism network, with the proceeds from this fee revenue later being donated to public goods, which is turning degens into regens. Now, I want to show you guys a couple of charts that I should have gotten up before, but I'm just going to get them up now. Bear with me. So first chart we have here is basically the daily transactions chart of the Optimism network. You can see massive spike, right, from people kind of like using the kind of like network to claim their airdrop, because you have to claim it on layer 2. And then also we have the amount of fee revenue that's been generated. Now this doesn't update very often, so I don't think this is completely accurate, but Optimism has generated at least $270,000 worth of fee revenue today, and all the profit. So that's not so all the profit that goes from basically the fee revenue here, so it's not going to be 270,000, it's whatever the profit portion of that is actually going to public goods funding. So basically we have a lot of public goods funding coming through here. And then also another thing that I wanted to kind of highlight was on Ultrasound Money, the ultrasound.money website here, Optimism is actually in the top 5 burners for today. So you can see here over the last 24 hours, Optimism, the OVM canonical transaction chain, which is basically the smart contract where the Optimism network posts its batches to from L2, has burned 113 ETH, and the Optimism L2 gateway, which is the bridge contract in and out of Optimism, has burned 68 ETH. So in total, if you kind of like calculate them together, and put it at 170 ETH or something like that, or 180, which would put them at number third as at kind of today's burners, which is very, very cool to see. And then you've also got like the OVM stake commitment chain down here as well, so another 40 ETH, which would push them even up to number 3, like even above Uniswap if you kind of like count all of the Optimism related traffic here. And you could even say that some of the Uniswap traffic was influenced by Optimism too, because of people trading the token, right? And the reason why I wanted to point this out was because there's been a bad narrative going around recently that L2s are parasitic to Ethereum L1 and don't kind of like add value to ETH. And I mean, you guys know that that's a silly narrative, but for those of you who may not be aware of why, all the L2s have to pay Ethereum for security, and they pay Ethereum in ETH, and most of that ETH gets burned as part of the way the EIP 1559 works on Ethereum. So, like, how can it be parasitic if it's literally adding value directly back to ETH? Like, there's no way around it. The only way that these L2s cannot add value to ETH and be parasitic is if they settle somewhere else. Like, if there's an L2 on another chain, then obviously it's not settling on Ethereum, it's not paying gas fees in Ethereum. It becomes parasitic. But if an L2, an L2 is living on Ethereum, is posting its transaction proofs and it's kind of like call data and batches, whatever else, right, to L1 Ethereum, then it has to pay ETH in gas. There's no way around that, and there will never be a way around that unless we change the rules in the future, which I doubt the community would agree to do that. They're not parasitic. They're actually very, very nice and very, very additive as well. And on that note, I should kind of like point out this tweet from David Mihal here, who said that Optimism was responsible for 1.6% of all fee revenue paid on Ethereum over the last 24 hours. Now, I know this network activity is kind of like not going to be the norm for Optimism for a while, because obviously there's a big spike due to the token launching. But you can just imagine when this kind of activity is the norm, and we get even more activity on these networks once they kind of like grow, once we have better applications, things like that on the network itself. They're going, as I said before, like it's going to take a while, but eventually layer 1 block space will just be used up by layer 2s. And again, it's not parasitic because they're paying for layer 1 block space in ETH, and ETH is being burned. So I think it's really cool to kind of like see that. It's really cool to see it playing out as we kind of like envisioned it would. And I love the fact that we have like clear evidence of this to show people now, rather than kind of like just saying it. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you say something and it's true. People, I think, a lot of people think like to, see it with their own eyes sort of thing. So yeah, it's great to see this here. And you can visit this website as well if you want, l2fees.info/L1 fees. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. And last up here on Optimism side, there was a bit of drama around how they did the launch here. So basically, they kind of like did a little thread of like what happened and kind of like why the airdrop launch was a bit, I don't know if I'd call it buggy, but a bit like, what's the word I'm looking for? It didn't run as ideally as we would want it to. And Polynya had a bunch of great questions that they asked here saying, why was the announcement not ready in time? You have known for months the number of participants and the expected load based on previous airdrops. Why do you seem surprised? Why was the public RPC not upgraded well in advance? A post-mortem is essential. Now, Jing from the Optimism team here, one of the co-founders, responded to Polynya and said, you're right. We focused on hardening the sequencer because that's where our anxiety was. On that, our optimists killed it, and the sequencer processed 274,000 transactions without a hitch. However, we vastly underestimated the RPC load, which saw 10,000 requests a second. Our mistake was planning for average case claim volume, not worst case, but we don't waste mistakes. Retro public goods funding, retrospective incoming. So the retrospective, like a post-mortem, is incoming. That said, I'm proud of how all the optimists handled the utter insanity of the last week. So on that note, where we're talking about RPCs here, I put out a tweet where I said, so I see we're comparing RPC issues with chains completely going offline like they're the same thing. CT has the collective intelligence of a goldfish. So I've explained what RPCs are before, but just a refresher here. An RPC is basically a node that you kind of like connect to, a piece of infrastructure that you connect to in order to relay your transactions. On Ethereum, you can do it through Infura or Alchemy. On Optimism, you have the kind of like official, like Optimism RPC, and then I think there are a couple of others that may support Optimism. I think Infura may support it. But anyway, what ended up happening is that the RPC got overloaded, and it's very hard to get transactions through when that happens. And this actually has happened on Polygon before, the Polygon PoS chain, for those of you who have experienced it there. But this is not this is not akin to the chain going offline or the kind of like chain slowing down or having degraded performance, because the chain worked fine. As Jing said, the sequencer itself processed all the transactions just fine if you could get them in. So if you were, for instance, running your own RPC for Optimism on your own kind of like computer and talking to that and relaying your transactions via that, they would have gotten processed. It's just that people use the public RPC, and that meant that kind of like it was overloaded and people couldn't get their transactions in. But the network itself ran fine, which is cool because it was a good stress test for the network. So just kind of wanted to highlight that one there. But I think that's going to be it on the Optimism front. I think, yes, there's a related kind of thing that I wanted to talk about related to Optimism, but that was it for Optimism kind of like for today. So hopefully you guys had fun. It was nice. It was a nice little thing to wake up to in the morning today. I look forward to the other L2s doing their tokens as well. So as I said, I put out this tweet on a related note to Optimism, but I said, as an ecosystem, we need to be building better and more sustainable applications that people actually want to use and actually get both social and monetary value out of. None of the protocol level stuff like scaling matters if we don't create the ongoing demand to use it. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to focus on with this tweet. Firstly is that there's only a handful of applications that I would say have achieved kind of like a sustainable moat or a sustainable kind of like product market fit within crypto today. Off the top of my head, or within Ethereum today, off the top of my head, I can think of 3: Uniswap, ENS, and stablecoins. Now, you might think it's weird that I'm calling stablecoins an application, but I consider them to be one because it's like they deliver so much value to the ecosystem. Now, what I mean by sustainable is that they're not. We need these applications to not be on either extreme during market cycles. So, for example, there are certain apps that get like a lot of use for maybe a couple of months in a bull market, and then they get basically zero use in a bear market. That's the extreme, right? The 0 to 100 is the spectrum. And during those kind of like couple months in a bull market, an app will be at 100, and they'll be flying. They'll think they've got product market fit. They'll think that everything's amazing, and then they'll be at 0 during the bear market. Whereas something like a Uniswap or an ENS or stablecoins, while they do benefit, obviously, and they do better during bull markets, it's not a 0 or 100 thing for them. It's more like maybe in bull markets they do 70, 80, 90, maybe not 100, right? Because 100 would mean that they kind of like have this massive spike all of a sudden and then kind of like go to drop down from there. And then maybe they drop to 40 or 50 during a bear market, so to speak. But it's never 0 or 100 for them, right? It's always kind of like nuanced in the middle. They're still growing, they're still got traction, and they're still going to be there the next time the market heats up as well. And they're still going to be there in a really big way. So I think those 3 are at the top of my head. But most of the stuff in this ecosystem it does not fall into that category at all. Now, because of that, all of this extra capacity that we have coming online over the next 12 to 18 months, whether it be the layer 2s themselves, adding extra capacity, or layer 1 upgrades like dank shard, proto dank sharding, they're going. I think like this time next year, or maybe a bit later than that, within the next 12 to 18 months, I'm going to make the bold prediction that we're actually going to have more Ethereum decentralized block space, and I call it Ethereum block space because if it's a true roll-up, a true layer 2, it's considered Ethereum block space in my mind. We're going to have so much of it coupled with proto dank sharding that I don't think we're going to have enough demand to fill it all. So the fees for end users at layer 2 are going to absolutely collapse. Like, they're going to be so cheap that people are going to wonder why they ever doubted Ethereum scaling to begin with. Now, that actually presents a bit of a challenge. The challenge it presents is, okay, how do we build more sustainable applications? How do we fill this new block space that we have? And I think there's a few different ways we can do it. One is that layer 2s are going to, what's the word I'm looking for? They're going to open up a bunch of new design space for applications. So things that can't be done on layer 1 will be able to be done on layer 2. So that's a big thing, actually. That's actually probably the biggest thing that's going to happen with that extra block space that's available, and that not just a block space, but the kind of like extra way, the new ways to develop applications on layer 2 that you can't do on layer 1, especially around the non-EVM ecosystems like Starknet, for example, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is they're going to enable kind of like not just new applications, but new types of applications. So what I mean by that is that there's been applications that have been tried on layer 1 Ethereum before, such as decentralized social media, that just don't work due to scalability. On layer 2, they kind of like will work because they get more scalability there. And then from there, it just becomes, okay, do people actually want to use these applications? Here's all the scale. We don't need to worry about scale anymore. It's cheap to use or even free to use, but do people actually want to use it? I think they will if it's good enough, right? If it actually adds enough, as I said, social and monetary value to them. It can add only one thing. Like, people don't use Twitter, and a lot of people don't use Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and expect any monetary value out of it. Yes, there are people that use it. Like, for example, on Instagram, you can be like an influencer or something and make money that way. But the majority of people do not use it as a way to make money. But right now in crypto, the majority of people use it to make money. And yes, crypto is obviously heavily financialized, but at the same time, there are many more non-financial applications that we can build that we can kind of like that will be able to be built because of layer twos. And I think the last thing is that we need to stop doing this kind of like game of do liquidity mining, Ponzify the app for a few months, and let's get a lot of growth really quickly, and then have to pay for that over the kind of like the course of the next few years, because we basically borrowed from the future for that growth. That trend needs to reverse, or just kind of like completely stop, or at least slow down, for us to get more sustainable applications. So those will be like the three major things that I'm kind of looking at. But yeah, I think within the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to have more block space than we know what to do with. And you could argue we already have that today in terms of Optimism and Arbitrum have more capacity than we're using, just as examples there. But the thing is that they're still expensive because layer one, relatively expensive, right? Because layer one is still expensive for them. But once we have proto dank sharding in place and layer two's costs for layer one are negligible, then we're going to have like sub-cent transaction fees potentially on some of these layer twos, especially with their own upgrades like compression and things like that. Core data compression, that's what I'm looking for. That, people aren't going to know what to do with the extra block space. So I'm super excited for that, actually. I think that's going to be really cool to see it kind of flip from having too much demand, not enough block space, to having too much block space and not enough demand. We're going to have to see how that goes. And it depends on market conditions at the time as well. Like, if the market's like super bullish in another 12 to 18 months, then maybe we'll fill that capacity in the short term. But I'm more about like the long-term sustainable ecosystems. I don't want to see just short-termism, but I mean, I don't think anyone can stop that from happening. There's always going to be those boom and busts, but I hope that we can build more sustainable applications going forward. All right, another thing that I tweeted out today got to do with mining. So I said there will be an insane influx of GPUs hitting the secondary market after the merge is completed. I think this may lead to a double whammy positive narrative change from gamers specifically. They may stop hating Ethereum since it's now proof of stake, and they'll also love the cheap GPUs. So basically, GPUs right now are being used, like a lot of them are being used to mine Ethereum. Because of that, there was a GPU shortage for a very long time, and GPU prices skyrocketed. I bought one when they were kind of like really high in price. I actually had to buy one because my one died. I bought a 3080 Ti from Nvidia. It cost me $3,500 Australian dollars. That same graphics card today is $2,100, I think. And this is before this influx comes from the Ethereum miners once the merge is completed here. So, and gamers hated crypto because of this. Like, they absolutely hated it. And then the second point is that they hate crypto or hate Ethereum, and because it's proof of work, and because it's like bad for the environment, or they believe it's bad for the environment, right? So those are the two things that are going to change. The game is going to have really cheap GPUs to pick up on the secondary market, and they're also going to or some of them at least will know that it's because Ethereum transitioned to proof of stake and is no longer bad for the environment. So I'm looking forward to that. I really, really am. I think it's going to be a great narrative shift outside of crypto. Obviously, narratives within crypto are a different kind of like ball game, but outside of crypto, I think it's going to be a very, very positive shift. So looking forward to that. And there's a bunch of great discussions in the replies as well here if you want to check them out. Polynya brought up the fact that some of these GPUs can be used for ZK proving, and I've discussed this before. They can, but I don't think there's going to be enough demand to absorb most of these GPUs by the time the merge happens. Like, the merge is happening in August or September, guys. Like, we're not even close to being able having a kind of like L2 want to decentralize its proving, like its ZK proving, right? So it will happen eventually, but I don't think there's going to be anywhere near enough demand to soak up all the GPUs that are going to be hitting the market due to kind of like mining going by the wayside here. So very much looking forward to kind of like seeing the fallout from this. All right, so Swell Network put together a little tweet thread today, and they started by saying, liquid staking is the talk of the town lately and will become more popular after the ETH2 merge. Existing solutions have paved the way for liquid staking and have proven to be robust. But what's left to be desired? Here's our Staking 2.0 manifesto with 9 reasons to use Swell Network for liquid ETH staking. Now, I've discussed Swell, I think, a couple of times on the Refuel before. Disclosure, I'm an investor and advisor to Swell. Just want to get that out there. I don't know if I've said that on the Refuel before, but yeah, just getting that out there. But the reason I bring them up is because I've talked a lot about Lido dominance recently and about how I believe one of the core pillars of, peeling people off Lido and reducing Lido's dominance, or at least pausing it for the time being until withdrawals are enabled, and then we can work on reducing it, is more competition. We obviously have Rocket Pool, and they have their own issues that they're working through because they have those minimums that they need to kind of like bring down, and there are a bunch of other things going on there. And I obviously promote Rocket Pool a bunch on here as well. But there's also, I've talked about Stakewise before. There is Swell Network, and there's a bunch of others out there. And there's all these liquid staking providers. They're going to work to take dominance away from Lido, and that's what we want. So that's why I was like, yeah, okay, I'd love to be an investor advisor in Swell because I want to kind of like support them. I want to help them. A major reason being to take away from Lido's market share. And I'm trying to become a Rocket Pool kind of like ODAO member. I definitely want to get a kind of like a node up eventually as well, kind of like with Rocket Pool, to support them as much as I can, and Stakewise as well. I mean, just mentioning them, I think that I'm able to support them just through that kind of like front. I don't hold any Stakewise tokens or anything like that, but yeah. So I'm trying to just basically take that dominance away, or at least make it a healthier kind of like staking ecosystem. I've talked about it a lot on the Refuel before, but yeah, definitely go give this thread from Swell Network a read. You may want to stake with them when they're live instead of Lido or Rocket Pool or whoever else. It's up to you to decide who you want to go with. I'm not going to tell you who to go with, guys. Like, I'm just going to put out the solutions. I'm going to highlight the ones that I think are worthwhile to look into, and then you can make a decision for yourself. But I will say one thing though. I know Lido is very tempting right now to kind of like stake with because they have big liquidity pools and things like that. Even though the peg is off, the liquidity pool is still big. They make it very easy to kind of like stake with them. But I would suggest staking with one of the others. Like this is I think of this like I think about client diversity. It's not that Lido is a bad service, right? They're a good service. Like, they wouldn't have so much stake with them if they weren't a good service. Just like it's not like Prism is a bad client, right? But the thing is that if you care about the health of the beacon chain, if you care about the health of the overall Ethereum ecosystem, then I think as being a good beacon chain citizen or a good Ethereum citizen, it's your duty to make sure and to be aware of the fact that staking with Lido at this point in time is actually detrimental to the network. Just like using Prism when they were the supermajority was detrimental to client diversity on the beacon chain. Same goes for using Geth, right? Like on the execution layer side, you should be using Nethermind or Besu or, instead of Geth. Not because Geth is bad, but just because they have too much dominance on the execution layer side for client diversity, and you should be thinking about the health of the beacon chain and things like that as well. So definitely go give this thread from Swell Network a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description. All right, so speaking of client diversity, Coinbase Cloud put together a thread here about how they're working on client diversity, and this is basically an update. So they talked about it on February 23rd. This is an update coming about 3 and a little bit months later, which is cool to see. You can read this thread and kind of like it gives a breakdown of what they've been working on. I've highlighted how Coinbase was able to reduce their Prism usage substantially after the client diversity push was done, which is really cool to see. But we actually have stats right from kind of like Coinbase themselves here, where they say Coinbase Retail now has 65% of its validators on non-Prism clients. So they have only 35% Prism clients. That's awesome. And most of their clients are on Lighthouse and Prism right now. And I think they're doing even more work in the background in order to support further client diversity. So Coinbase is being a good beacon chain citizen. They were at like 95% Prism usage. Then there was that push, and then they understood the risks of running a super majority client. They understood that they need to kind of reduce that in order to help the ecosystem and help the beacon chain and maintain kind of like the security here and the health of the beacon chain. And they did it, which is really, really cool to see. So, big kudos to Coinbase here for doing this. And definitely check out this thread. I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. All right, last couple of things here. So I put out another tweet today where I said the shift in narrative over the last few months from Ethereum will never transition to proof of stake to people arguing that proof of stake is just like the existing banking system is hilarious. The haters will always move the goalposts. This is typically a sign that they have no real arguments. So this is quite funny, right? People always say this in the non kind of like Ethereum, Bitcoin maximalist camp. They always try to kind of like say that proof of stake is just like the existing banking system, or it's rich get richer, or it's plutocracy, or there's on-chain governance. Some people say that, and I was like, no, Ethereum doesn't have on-chain governance. But before that, that's happened over the last few months. Before that, there was this major narrative that Ethereum would never transition to proof of stake because it kept getting quote unquote delayed, right? It took forever, and to be fair, it did. But the thing is that they can't say this anymore. Like the smarter ones, and some of these people aren't actually dumb. They're just kind of like blinded by bias. But the smarter ones have realized that, okay, the Ethereum merge is actually happening. Ethereum is actually going to finally transition to proof of stake. So what else can we say to kind of like discredit this? And one of the narratives, as I pointed out, is them kind of like comparing it to the existing banking system, saying it's plutocratic, saying the rich get richer, saying all these other kind of like shitty narratives. And as I said, if people are always moving the goalposts to try and kind of like highlight weaknesses in something, then it's typically a sign that they have no real arguments that they can put forward, no real debates, no real anything. And that just is the kind of like the short sign to me that they got no idea what they're talking about, and they're just speaking from like a biased position here. And to be fair, it happens with everything, not just proof of stake. But yeah, I just kind of like wanted to highlight that for you guys as you're wading through public opinion on things. Like it's always funny whenever I see these sorts of things, because you can obviously tell they haven't done their research. They're just speaking from a position of bias and just speaking purely out of kind of like hate for something, right? Which doesn't lend itself to very good arguments at all. All right, last up here, we have DeFi Saver that's now live on Arbitrum and Optimism. So DeFi Saver is available on optimistic rollups with support for Aave, LiFi protocol, and their regular partners 0x, Alchemy, and Tenderly. So you can read the full announcement blog post here and the kind of like thread here. I've talked about DeFi Saver plenty of times before on the Refuel. Basically, it's an advanced DeFi management tool. So essentially allows you to kind of manage your different positions across different DeFi apps from one interface here. One of the kind of like top features that they have is a way to kind of like save yourself from liquidation. So have like automation that basically saves your position from being liquidated, which I think is a really, really great feature, especially if you're someone who's like a peak degen and you really want to play with leverage, well, maybe check something like DeFi Saver out to potentially save your positions in adverse market environments. But yeah, I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to check out. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.